Hey there, people. Welcome to another edition of the Pop Ride. Starting in Richardson, Texas, just north of Dallas, continuing through the suburbs, headed north. Then, actually, we head east, then north. Eventually, we head back down south and go back to where we started. And I don't know why I'm talking over the video this time. Maybe because absolutely nothing interesting happened in this ride, for me at least. Stayed in the back most of the time. Or maybe I just like hearing myself talk, I don't know. But I thought I would just talk a little bit over this video. Just pure stream of conscious cycling. No particular agenda, no any particular, I don't have any notes. I don't have a mental outline in my mind of what I want to talk about. I'm just here talking. And, I put together these group ride videos, and heaven knows I've put together a lot of them. And most of them, don't get watched very much. That's fine. Don't have very many subscriptions. That's fine. I don't care. Not in this for views or subscriptions or money or whatever, because certainly heaven knows I don't make any money doing this. But I enjoy cycling. And I enjoy the videos. And sometimes I enjoy watching my own videos. Now, I don't think it's pure narcissism. It's a little bit narcissism, but it's not pure narcissism. I kind of like the idea of just documenting what I do and having it there to look at later, especially in the future when perhaps I'm not able to ride or whatever happens. I had these moments this fun, and it's here for me to reflect back upon it if I want to. And then there's just practical considerations of maybe I'm sitting on the trainer and looking at the Zwift screen's boring, and I'd rather just watch one of these videos. Zwift on the side, one of these videos in front of me, and think about the guys that I know and that I'm going to see again soon, and just helps pass the time as you grind away on the trainer. Started the video a little bit early this time. In other words, I started the GoPro a little early again, taking it down to 2.7K instead of 4K. And that allows the battery life to last a little bit longer. The main reason that I don't start the video sooner is because most of the quote-unquote action happens in the second half of the ride. But that doesn't mean you sometimes don't get excitement in the beginning of the ride. For example, we had a little fender bender today on the ride. When I say fender bender, one person went down, unfortunately. Touch of the wheels, so that's always something to be careful of. Gotta be careful. Gotta be careful of your front wheel and not overlapping your wheels. Just don't do it. It's not worth it on a group ride. It's not worth it ever. Somebody comes over, takes out, they don't know that you're right behind them. They just move over and they take out your wheel, and your wheel turns and you're on the ground. So got to be careful. Fortunately, no one else went down, and the person who went down was not hurt, nor do I think his bike was damaged, so that's good. But like to avoid those things altogether. So it's the off season, and it's officially getting cooler in the Metroplex area. I put on long sleeves today, and actually I wore my arm warmers on top of my sleeves as well. So first time of the year. Well, maybe this is the first time I've done both those things. Just to try to be a little more comfortable. As I've gotten more into cycling, my body has changed. My upper body's shrunk. My arms have become smaller. And, I'm not so sure that lots of cycling would be good if I was single and, trying to win over some women with the size of my biceps would not be a good way to go about that. I would choose some other thing besides cycling. Anyway, here's Clint right in front of me. If I had like a diesel truck and my engine went out, I would just put Clint in my engine bay. He would be my diesel engine in my truck. That guy's got a diesel engine. It's fun to watch him go. And so, that's part of the fun of riding. You get to know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and you get to race with and against people if they are into racing, or even if they're not into racing. And when you see someone who's really strong or who's gotten a lot stronger, who's improved or puts you into the hurt locker, then that's fun. That gets you going. That gets you thinking about getting better yourself, or what is it gonna what does it take? How what is he doing? How is he training? How much work does he put in? What kind of rides does he do? And those kinds of thoughts, at least they go through my mind sometimes. Putting yourself up to the challenge of matching somebody that's at a different level than you, and then the excitement of maybe getting, in certain circumstances, uh, the feeling or the realization that you've reached a higher level than you previously had, that you've accomplished something that you couldn't have accomplished before, and now you've done it, and that's a good feeling. Um, for example, you know, being a little bit starstruck, like, somebody that about in the local cycling scene, and is very accomplished and very good, and suddenly you're on that person's wheel, or that person's on your wheel, and you're like, wow, I'm in a ride with this person that totally is at a different level. And that's kind of like a good check for where you are. Now, having said that, the more I get into this over time, the more I realize that ego is such a small part, or it should be such a small part of what I do. I mean, it matters so little. So, in other words, if I'm a little stronger, if I'm a little faster, does that really matter? No. If I win a race, does that really matter? No. What does matter? And that's, I think, a question that each of us has to come to an answer to, those of us that are into cycling. Because certainly there's people who might, no, I don't think anyone who's like a serious, hardcore, training for nationals, amateurs, is listening to my podcast. No offense to those of you listening to this. Maybe you're second guessing whether you should listen to this now. But anyway, those kind of people are like, yeah, winning's everything. And I just don't have aspirations to that, for that. And probably if I did have aspirations for it, I wouldn't be able to accomplish it anyway. And the amount of work that it would take would so impinge other things in my life that I would have to sacrifice too much, and it wouldn't be worth it anyway, even if I had the potential. So, what is the fun part? The fun part, for me at least, is the experience. So, what kinds of experiences are fun? What broadens me as a person? What makes me happy? And I don't know that there's always going to be the same answer to that question, because for one, sometimes we get bored of doing the same things over and over, and maybe you get all you can out of cycling and you try something different. Maybe you try a different kind of cycling. Um, one question that goes through my mind is, what's my potential level? Like, I've reached a certain level. Do I have another level of fitness and performance that I could reach if I just put in a little bit more work, if I just trained a little bit differently? Um, what would that be like? Would that be fun? Would that matter? And no, I kind of want to know the answer to that. And I don't know if I will get to know the answer to that, but I'd like to know the answer to that. Do I have just like one more little level that I can get to? And I know what I need to do to find the answer, and that is put in more time than I currently do. And that's difficult. So on Strava, you can put in a goal for how many miles or how much time you want to put in per week. And my goal per week is 8 hours. It's just a standing goal. And oftentimes I do accomplish that, but sometimes I don't. And I realize that if I really want to be at a different level, I need to put in more time than that. And that's difficult. And I don't know that I can do that with everything going on in my life. So I kind of know what I have to do. The question is, am I willing to sacrifice to accomplish that? Um, Fun going up and down this hill. It's been raining in the Dallas area for the past. Yesterday it rained almost all day, so the ground's completely saturated. We have puddles here and there. Every time I go through a puddle, I'm wondering if my power meter is gonna fritz out. Because certainly if it was raining, it would stop working. But as far as I can tell during this ride, it kept working fine. Thank goodness. And yeah, we had a debate on Facebook about what's the proper etiquette for taillights on a ride, on a group ride. So some people were complaining about taillights being too bright. Um, I won't say who, but there was a guy a couple of weeks ago had a taillight, and it kind of had this like constant red, and then it would have this one big flash. And if you were right behind him, it was like a blinding flash. Just for a split second, you'd be completely blinded by the big red flash that would happen every like 4 seconds, 3 seconds. So it wasn't that frequent as far as the flash. In that case, I actually said something and said, "Wow, that's blinding." So uh, my complaint was I don't like flashes that people wear on the back of their helmet in group rides because that's right at eye level, and if you have a big light on the back there, that can be kind of bothersome. Some people have the opinion that the red lights should be not blinking; that they should be going constantly. And I think there's a good argument for that. But on the other hand, that's going to be less visible to the cars. And yeah, so tail light controversies among group riders. Um, Here I am hanging out in the back, and significant gap in front of me. If I was racing, I would not have a gap like that open. Leaving that kind of gap allows you to do a little more work, but not be on the front. So it's kind of like being on the front, but you're not on the front because you're not getting. Well, in other words, you're getting maybe a little bit of draft, but not a lot of draft. And you can put in a little more work, kind of be in have some of the element of the safety of the group, but also mitigate against the uh, possibility of being involved in a crash if there is a crash in the group because you have more room to stop. And so it's a way of potentially getting a little bit of a different kind of workout besides just being on the front and pulling and hammering and so forth. You might get a little more constant higher watts. And of course, being in the back with the accordion effect, you're going to have to do a little more sprinting and stuff from lights and turns and things like that. So it's not a great way to be efficient. And if you're more of a beginner, and again, I'm a beginner. Don't call myself anything but a beginner. But if you're a beginner, it's great practice to learn to ride efficiently, because riding efficiently is the name of the game in a race. Of course, if you're not interested in racing, who cares? Just ride safely. Don't care about riding efficiently. Just ride safely. And there's a you know there's a tension between something like a group ride and a race. In a race, you want to be efficient and fast. In a group ride, maybe you actually want a workout and you want to work harder. So efficiency is not really the goal. So, for example, maybe you start a new echelon when there's crosswinds and you're going to be in the wind more because you want a little bit more of a workout. But different ways of approaching the group ride, and sometimes a group ride like this is a good way of practicing pack position, which is not something I'm really great at. I mean, I know how to move up in a pack, but oftentimes I don't feel like I can be bothered when I'm in a group ride unless there's a difficult part or a hammer zone that I want to go hard in. But that also sometimes translates to certainly I've been in races at times where my positioning is poor, my decision making is poor. I'm hanging in the back for no good reason, kind of like might do sometimes on the group rides. So, for example, on the pop ride, I might spend a lot of time on the first half near the back, or sometimes not. But in the second half, I'll often spend a lot of time near the front or on the front. So it just depends on the day and how I feel and what's going on and who's on the ride and everything. It's kind of interesting here who shows up for the rides in the winter. As the race season approaches, as winter is ending, we'll start to get more and more racers, fast guys that will join the ride as sort of a race preparation. So maybe they're working on the trainer a lot or doing some long, slow distance work, and they need that VO2 max. They need to ramp it up. They need those little, 600 watts here, 600 watts there. That it's a little bit hard to replicate outside of a race. While this isn't a race, it can certainly feel like a race at times, depending on who shows up and what the ride is like. So, ironically, in the winter, we sometimes get faster on this ride rather than slower. And oftentimes, actually, the middle of the summer can be the slowest time for the pop ride because a lot of guys are racing or out of town or whatever on vacation. And a lot of the racers, if they're not there participating in the ride, and when I say racers, I typically mean Cat 3, Cat 4, a sprinkling of a couple Cat 2s uh, that do this ride. Very, very rarely would we get a Cat 1 that would do the pop ride. I mean, like twice a year. So not very often that they would join this ride. So I think it was last year that we had two guys that did the pop ride between them twice or three times, and both of them rode professionally this year in 2018. So that's kind of cool that occasionally we get guys drop in. These were two local guys that drop in and on the ride, and the ride completely changes when you have people at that level. That is, if they're not just sitting in. But them putting in a little bit of work, just a little interval, can be sort of like hanging on for dear life for the rest of us. Uh, there's a Cat 1 that not this past winter, but the winter before, he did the ride, and boy, it completely changed the ride. He just could inflict so much more pain than anyone else could, and um, just hanging on his wheel was like hanging on for dear life. And I remember one night. Anyway, one night he was going really hard on Murphy Road. Murphy Road is a road where we head south, so in the winter we usually have a tailwind, and he was just going all out. And after the ride, I checked my power, and I realized I'd done a power PR on his wheel. So not in the wind, on his wheel, I did a power PR for, I don't know, 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, or something like that. So I ran into, like, I was on a ride with him on a chill winter Saturday ride that wasn't that many people, and I happened to be, we were two abreast, and I happened to be next to him, so I got to talk to him a little bit. And I mentioned to him, I said, just the other week, I was on your wheel, and I did a power PR on your wheel. And he got, the funny thing was, he says to me, he goes, I hear that a lot. So that cracked me up. I hear that a lot. Um, yeah, it's fun to get these guys. Honestly, when I saw, like, when he would join the ride, like, I'd get, like, a little ball of anxiety going to me, like, okay, now I know that I'm going to suffer like a maniac on this ride. And, you know, I guess if you have the right mindset, you're okay with that. That doesn't bother you. You like the challenge. Going back to how do you use group rides, on I think it was the Villa News podcast, one of the coaches said, yeah, when I have my athletes do group rides, I want them to go hard. I want them to, put in hard intervals. I want them to go for breakaways. I want them to do these things. And if they never get dropped on a group ride, they're not doing it right. So if you're always sitting in and not working hard, you might not be doing the group ride right. If you're never risking getting dropped because you've gone so hard, maybe you're not doing it right. In terms of if you want to use the group ride for your fitness betterment. Is that actually a word? But having said that, none of us really like getting dropped, especially at night on a freaking highway. All right. I guess we're not really on, well, we're kind of on highways. I guess you might call Parker Road kind of like a highway. Anyway, roads where people drive 50 miles an hour, 45 miles an hour at night, not the funnest thing to be on your bike. Yeah, this is a traditional hammer zone right here, Park Place. A little bit of a tailwind in this section right here because of the north wind today. Usually this would be a headwind in the summer with the south wind. And always fun times on this rickety, rattly road that needs to be resurfaced here. And then we get going over to the left and we get a little bit of a crosswind, usually. And so you'll have kind of like an echelon form. Usually we bunch up before this point, and so if you're in the back, you can actually easily get to the front if it's not too crowded, if people will open up a lane, so to speak. And then it's a little bit of an uphill, just a slight uphill. We crest up here a little bit and then a slight downhill. So always a fun time on this section. Yeah. So I guess one thing, yeah, maybe I ought to talk about for a minute about what it's like to make these videos, what I do. So one thing is, I have this GoPro session, session 5, GoPro 5 session on the front that will record up to 4K. Now GoPro will not be making any more sessions, will not be making a new generation of this session. The session is the smaller cube-like GoPro camera. Have that on the front, and then I have a Cycle IQ on the back. I'm not the biggest fan of the Cycle IQ. I had to replace my first one under warranty, which was a huge pain. They put me through this really dumb process of answering 5 million questions over email before they finally had me send it in. So the Cycle IQ records in 720p, and the GoPro, of course, records up to 4K if you want to. And so those things always have to be charged before the ride. I have to choose when to start them. The nice thing about the Cycle IQ is that it has something like a 5 or 6 hour battery life. So you can run that the entire time you're riding, which is nice because then you're also recording things related to potential traffic accidents, cars, things like that. It's basically a dash cam. And so, cameras have to be started, and then at the end of the ride, cameras stopped, and get back to my house and take the cameras off my bike, and then start to upload the video to the computer. The 4K video, the file sizes are quite large, so for like an hour-long video, it might be 25-ish gigabytes for the 4K video on the GoPro. So that's a lot of memory, and it's a lot of stuff to manipulate in your computer. So it can take like 20 minutes just to get the stuff off the card onto the hard drive of my computer. Then I have to put on the Cycle IQ stuff, and those are AVI files, and so they're not compressed, so they're relatively large, even though they're just 720p, and those need to be uploaded. Then I open up Adobe Premiere Elements, and just put the videos in. And one of the more difficult parts is syncing the rear view with the front view. It takes, it's not that hard, but it takes a little bit of time trying to figure out exactly, frame, like hopefully close to within a frame or two of having it synced up properly. The Cycle IQ videos are a bit of a pain because they overlap each other, and it took me a while to figure out exactly how they overlapped each other. But of course I understand it now. They overlap each other by a second, meaning that if I have the first clip of 10 minutes, I need to have the second clip overlap that first clip by about 1 second for it to stay in time. So my earlier videos do not have, I did not do that because I never bothered to figure it out. I just connect them, and so you get these different size gaps during the ride that were inaccurate in terms of syncing the front and the back. But now I think I have it pretty well down. Putting in some titles and things like that. Changing the size of the rear view, usually putting it up in the corner, changing the size, putting it up in the corner. Checking the audio to make sure that I'm not running both audios at the same time, the front and the rear. And then, of course, there's the power overlay. So there's a couple of different ways that I've done the power overlay. The way that I used to do it all the time was with Verb Edit, a free program put out by Garmin. So, those come up with some pretty nice graphics. I usually use the same one that Beacon Cyclist does in terms of the power overlay at the bottom. So you get this big bar that goes across the bottom, and the more power you put out, the bigger the bar looks. And so it looks a little like a video game, and it's pretty catchy. However, that would require me having a finished video and then putting that finished video through Verb Edit to come up with a second version of that finished video. So if you're running 4K, that takes about, usually like for an hour-long ride, usually takes like 6-7 hours to process just that first part. And then running it through Verb Edit and outputting in 4K, you're looking at probably even longer, like maybe 8 hours. So you're looking at a process time of like 14 hours to put out one video. 14 hours of computer crunching at almost 100% capacity. That's a lot of computing power. And so when Verb Edit screwed up their contract or whatever with Google API, you couldn't sync the videos correctly. So that's when I finally decided that maybe I would transfer over to a different method using Dashware. And one of the guys who I ride with, he uses Dashware, and he's been kind enough to show me, Sam Findlater. He has his own YouTube channel that if you follow mine, maybe you've probably seen his. Spelled Findlater, Sam. If you just search in YouTube, you can find his channel. You can subscribe. He does a lot of masters racing and does great videos and compilations and highlight videos of his races and group rides and other things. So he's kind of a little bit of my inspiration for this channel and doing this kind of thing. Anyway, he was gracious enough to show me his technique through Dashware. And Dashware, the way he does it is genius, in that he will output the power overlay all by itself as a tiny file, and then you take that file and include it in your first build in Adobe Premiere Elements, which is what I use, as my video editor. So that means I get to skip the whole second step. So usually it takes about 8 or 9 minutes to produce that blue strip that shows the power and the time and the miles and everything. It takes about 10 minutes to produce that in Dashware. Then I get that little tiny video file that goes across the screen, and I place that in my video. And now I have to link that up. I have to sync that, which can be a little bit tricky. It's a little bit trickier to sync with Dashware than it is with Verb Edit. But anyway, it saves me that whole second step of 6, 7, 8 hours of processing, which is super nice, and I like that. So that's why I've switched away from Verb Edit. It just saves me a ton of time and hassle instead of using Verb Edit. So if you're thinking about, if I had the energy and time, I'd put put together a video showing my workflow of how I make these videos so that you could, if you wanted to, make your own videos. And again, I don't have any pretense that anyone really cares about my particular videos. And well, whatever. It's just basically for me. But if maybe if that's useful, you could let me know in the comments if you'd like me to make like a screen, like basically me capturing my screen as I'm working on a video and talking about how I'm doing it. So doing it over and over has made me fairly efficient doing it, and there might be something to be gained if you're interested in that. But even if you say you are, I don't know if I will, because I don't know. Doing those kinds of videos take a lot more time and effort. But here we are at the light, about to turn left, and this is onto notorious Parker Road with the church fire segment and fierce crosswinds blowing across the open fields. So this is always a fun part of the ride. When I first started doing Pompeii, it was certainly a place to pay keen attention to my position and try to make sure that I didn't get dropped in this section, because this is certainly a place where many a hope of not getting dropped on the Pompeii ended. And, it's a little bit of fast traffic on this road. You don't really want to be riding it alone. Last week, I guess it was, we had a crash right here on this left-hander. So always got to be aware. And of course, I'm in the back and hanging out here. And guys in the front are doing what guys in the front will do, and guys in the back are doing what guys in the back will do. Wow, I've already talked for 32 minutes and I haven't said anything useful or interesting. Impressive. So I talked a little bit about how I make these videos. And yeah, I think, in the future it'll be easier and easier to make these videos. Right now it's kind of hard. I mean, it's laborious. I'm excited about the new GoPro, the newest version that will allow you to live stream from your GoPro through your phone. So conceivably, I could put a new GoPro, the new version, which I don't have, I haven't ordered, but if I had one, I could put it on the front of my bike. I could start the stream, and I could stream it on YouTube Live. It would only be streaming, I think, at 720p. I don't know that there's any advantage to watching me on a group ride live. Although, to be honest, if I couldn't be on the group ride and it was a group ride that I liked and cared about, and I was like bored, like I'd probably watch it, me, or I might drop in from time to time and check out what was going on. But I don't think that's the average person. So in the future, yeah, I think it'll be just easier to do high def, real time, sort of like Facebook Live videos. I mean, it's getting more and more ubiquitous to see guys with running cameras on their bikes, and I see Cycle IQs. I see more people than you might expect, running GoPros on their bikes, even in group rides. I guess for a lot of people, there's not really a lot of payoff for doing it. Like, that's why they don't upload them to YouTube, or I don't know what, I guess some people are running GoPros just sort of like a dash cam. And so, yeah, I think it's going to be, just like cell phones have ushered in a new era of taking pictures, where people have a camera with them wherever they go, and they take more pictures, and it's not a big deal to take a picture. When I was a kid, it was a big deal to take a picture. You had to use film, and you had to pay for film, and you had to pay for developing the film, and it took a while to develop the film, and you didn't know how your picture turned out until much later, and you had to be a little bit judicious taking your pictures. Like if you have a roll of 24 or 36, you're going to think a little bit before you start snapping away. Same thing is going to happen with first-person experience in terms of video. It's just, you could just have a small camera, just turn it on, and it's broadcasting live over the air. Sort of like every person potentially a TV station. And I think we're already coming to the time where the idea that a few influential people will determine what everyone is watching on TV, that era is coming to an end. And I have kids. They don't watch TV. They watch YouTube. They don't. They watch a little bit of TV, but they don't watch live TV. They don't know what channel surfing is. They literally have no idea what channel surfing is. We were on vacation, and we did like the VRBO thing. Rented a house, and this house had a little TV, and I think it was just over-the-air signal, and you had to change the channel of the TV to watch different things, and there was no internet or YouTube or anything like that. And my kids didn't even know how to do it, or what that was, about how you change channels to change what you're watching. And you can't pause it, you can't move it, you can't start it, you can't watch something different. You just have to watch whatever's there. My kids are more interested in these YouTube creators, and often it's really dumb stuff like watching video games or other people talking about video games. But yeah, the idea that it's just so much easier to do this and to create this high quality, at least image. I can't say that all content is high quality, because frankly, a lot of content is not high quality. So, I get on YouTube and I look at other cycling channels. I'm a fan. If you're listening to this, you're a fan of some sort. I watch that stuff and to be entertained, to learn, to pass the time, whatever. And I'm really impressed with what some people do, like the amount of time they put into it, the production values, the editing they do, the planning, all these things. And I think, wow, I just can't be bothered to do that. It's too much time. Don't have the interest, and and you see those channels for the most part have a lot more success. Although I would say success is measured. So, for example, Vegan Cyclist, he's successful, but in the grand scheme of those successful YouTube people, he's not that big. In other words, with the amount of effort and talent he has, if he had directed it in a different kind of venue outside of cycling, he'd probably be much more successful in terms of YouTube success. But there's something to be said for being one of the most successful YouTubers of his particular niche or niche. So, for example, he does get endorsements or sponsorships, like a bike company. He is sponsored by Wahoo. You probably didn't know that. So you noticed at some point probably that his computer changed over to a Wahoo, and the way he sets up his computer on his camera on his bike, you can see the computer and you're looking at a Wahoo, and that's not a coincidence. He is sponsored. He gets either a product or gets paid to sponsor them, and good for him. I don't get sponsored. The best monetary thing that I've gotten for my channel is that I got reimbursed my race entry fee for one particular race on the as a thank you for doing a video of my participation in the race. So that was nice. Yeah, so some of the things that you're watching with the YouTube cyclists, Some of that will be, I think, sponsored stuff, even if you don't realize that it's sponsored. Wow, I'm actually putting in a tiny effort here. Moving up to the front on legendary Murphy Road. Murphy Road's such a fun road. The road is nice for the most part. You don't have to worry about potholes and cracks and things like that. In the winter, it's a tailwind, and if we get a really blustery day, like a 20-mile-an-hour plus wind, we can just fly down this road, and that makes it a lot of fun. And it's 3 lanes each direction, so generally speaking, we don't have to worry about the traffic, and certainly we don't have to worry about traffic coming from the other direction like we would on a small 2-lane road. The route they used to take was a small 2-lane road, and this is, I think, much safer than that. And so I think we really like that. It'd be nice if we didn't have any lights on this section. Here I am going to the back, which is fine. I'm kind of on a wheel that's drifting back, and I don't really have room to get over. It's certainly not worth making a dangerous move that might endanger me or someone else to get over. And there was like a little bit of a sketchy moment where, yeah, this guy was getting past, and he started to drift a little bit to the left, and there was someone passing him on the left, and I kind of yelled out just as a warning so that people could be safe. But yeah, it's fun times on Murphy Road, which goes through Murphy, Texas, another suburb of the Dallas area that has been growing fast and has a lot of new homes, and it's relatively affordable for families looking to buy a home to raise their kids and all that jazz. Speaking of which, where are the kids on this ride? Where are the 20-year-olds on this freaking ride? That's one thing that's very apparent in cycling, is that it's heavily weighted towards older people like myself. And they're just, there ought to be all these like 20-year-olds, early 30s, that kind of person, and there's just not many of them. I don't know if it's always been like that, or if the downward trend in cycling and road cycling is just a manifestation of that. Generations of kids that spent less time on bikes as kids, and now they just don't exist in terms of being on the road cycling. Of course, cycling, there's some luxury to cycling. Like, you have to have time to cycle. There's an element of cost related to equipment. You'll notice everyone on this ride's in a kit. Well, the kit costs money. Um, the average kit is certainly probably over $150. The average bike on this ride is, I would guess, well over $3,000. The average person on this ride is running some kind of carbon wheel set, which generally going to cost you over $1,000, in some cases $2,000 or $3,000. You don't need that, especially you don't need carbon wheels. Everyone's, no one's on flats. Everyone's with cycling shoes and so forth, and so there's some equipment investment. I wouldn't have been able to afford all this when I was 23 years old, like college or whatever. Um, Nor was it really on my radar as a possibility, as something that one could do. I was just talking to someone the other day, and I'm trying to remember when I was a kid. I don't know that I ever saw a person in a cycling kit where I lived. Um, just if I did see one, it never stuck in my memory. Don't remember seeing any group rides or anything like that growing up. So maybe if I had known of those things, I might have tried it. No, I think it did exist because there's a guy I went to my high school who's like a year older than me, and he went to Texas A&M for college, and he, I think, rode for uh, the local Aggie cycling club or racing team or whatever it was. So I think he started riding slash racing before college, or so that tells me that there was something of a scene going on, but I was just completely unaware of it. I was aware of Greg LeMond and reading about him in the newspaper, but that's about it. I enjoyed riding a bike. I liked riding fast, but I didn't ride with anyone, except occasionally my friends. But as I got older, it wasn't riding with friends. I was just riding by myself, and I'd go out just for fun and ride my bike. No helmet, no shirt, especially at night. No lights. Uh, Flipped bars on my 10-speed, which looked a little bit ridiculous, but I guess it put me in a more upright position. I don't know whose idea it was to flip the bars. I'm pretty sure it was my dad's idea. So I still remember that bike. It was ugly and old even in its day, but it functioned. And yeah, I remember when my parents got me brand new. Again, I called them 10 speeds back then, so I guess they had, what, 5 in the back, 2 in the front. Got a brand new, I forget what, I don't think it was like any particular major brand, but it was a black road bike. And I don't even know what happened to that. Why did I stop riding that and start riding this old crappy flip bar bike? Anyway, my dad was pretty handy. He could fix bikes, and so I'm sure that second bike was a little bit larger and bought at a garage sale. And riding bikes, was a big part of my childhood. I have a son who's pretty young, and he's not very good at riding his bike. He doesn't do it very much, and I was thinking, boy, when I was his age, I had logged countless miles just riding around with my friends. And as far as I know, he doesn't have any friends who go out and ride bikes. Very few kids ride bikes to school, and back in my day, it seemed like every kid rode a bike to school. But yeah, what's going on in this ride right now? Um, I don't know. I'm actually not. Clicking on the files that are on the hard drive, and so when one file is done, I'm clicking to watch the next file. So in other words, they've not been joined. And that's because if I tried to look at them in Adobe Premiere, it would pause every 10 seconds and I'd be way off. So, but I'm looking at these files in Windows Media Player, and they start repeating. Like if it gets to the end, it'll repeat, and so it's possible maybe I have repeated and not realized I repeated, and maybe I'm like 8 minutes behind. I don't know. But anyway, what I'm watching right now is on Renner Road. This is the road that takes us back to the start, and this is where things usually get really spicy and faster, and it's a really fun part of the ride. So it's got a little bit of undulation, and you know those are things to think about. When do you put in your effort? Do you want to attack up the hill? What do you do once you're over the hill? Is the light going to be green or red? It's almost always red. And then we have an incline that heads up to the George Bush Tollway. And then at the very end, for the people that are left that are still on the ride that haven't drifted off back home, before the end of the ride, some people might do a little sprint, a little fun finish there. So this is a little bit of an incline here, the biggest incline in this part of the ride. We don't have much in the way of hills in this part of town, and in North Texas in general. So just a little hill can cause some separation, and that's fun. Opportunity to get in a little tiny interval with some increased power. So, yeah, this is just me musing on a Thursday night, and I really don't have anything else to say. And if you're just kicking yourself right now that you bothered to listen to this for this long and you hate yourself for it, I don't blame you. Um, I'd probably be better off if I sat down and if I'm going to actually say something, but to have a plan in what I'm going to say and hopefully a theme and some bullet points that have a slight bit of wisdom that might be useful in them. But heck, a lot of writing is just being in the moment and just doing it and not thinking about it too much and not overanalyzing things. You're just out there in the wind, you're out there on the wheels. And maybe I've commented on this before about whether bike riding is meditation, and I don't think it is. I mean, it reminds me of meditation, but it's not meditation. And the reason is it takes hyper awareness to ride safely in a fast bunch. You really need to be concentrating on your position, what's going on around you, what's going on ahead of you, not just one or two wheels ahead of you, but like what's really going on, you know, 40 yards up ahead of you. You need to be guarding your front wheel continuously so that you do not get taken out by someone hitting your front wheel. All these things come into play in terms of concentrating on the road. But at the same time, there's a rhythm to it. There's like an effort that takes away the thoughts of the day that you don't. You know, it's hard to be worrying about some particular problem in your life when you're out with your friends on a good, vigorous bike ride. And that's a kind of therapy, even if it does require concentration and being careful and some anxiety of riding in the dark and people are fast and you got someone sketchy in front of you and all those kinds of things that can happen. But there's a kind of meditation of just letting the just turning those pedals over and I'm not at the front here, but I'm like, okay, maybe I can do a little work and help these buddies here close the gap and get back on. And you just put in a little interval, and it feels good. All of it feels good, and that's what bike riding's about. It's about challenging your mind, challenging your body, feeling good, feeling fit, going fast, having the sensation of just rolling and going fast and getting better at it and so forth. So that's what makes it kind of addictive, and that's why you get these same people coming out time and time and time again to participate and do this. And uh, if you don't have this in your life, why not? If you do have this in your life, then you know all about it and you love it and you keep doing it. And it's sort of like a guy I talked to in Houston on a group ride, and I asked him if he raced, and he said no. He goes, "This group ride is my race." And if I had to choose between racing and group rides, and I can only do one or the other, I don't think I would pick racing. I might pick racing, but I guess one thing going against racing is the fact that it's not year round, and I wouldn't want to race year round. But I do group rides year round, and yeah, I'd probably pick group rides. I don't think I would pick racing. Um, the group rides, as one person said on a forum that I'm on, he said group rides, he says, structured training is good for racing and getting fit and faster. Group rides are good for the soul. And the implication, of course, is that group rides are not particularly good for race training. There's something to be said for that, especially how most people use group rides. On the other hand, shouldn't we pursue things that are good for the soul? Isn't that kind of the point, at least to some degree, of life, is pursuing things that are good for us, that make us feel better, that make us better people? Yeah, it's not such a bad thing to do that which is good for the soul. And that's what I think these group rides are. So I think on that note, I'm just going to cut out. There's more footage. I think we have about 7, 8 more minutes of footage here, but my throat's getting dry. I don't really have anything else to say. I've already said more than just rambled on for things that don't really matter. But yeah, it goes to show that people that are good at talking about stuff, they're good at it for a reason. They do it all the time. And actually, the guys that you hear on TV and the radio, they take notes. They have people working for them. They have outlines. They have talking points. And but they're also good at what they do. In most cases, making a lot out of nothing. So this is trying to make a lot of feeling out of something that actually is important and is gratifying and is soul enlarging. I don't think cycling is the only way to get to that. I think there's lots of ways to get to that. But cycling is a great way to be social, get fit, have fun, challenge yourself, feel good physically and mentally. I don't have to sell cycling to you guys. You guys already know about cycling. You guys are already knowing all about it. And like many things in life, it's hard to convince people to do anything or change their mind about anything. Uh, whether it's politics, religion, philosophy, whatever. People don't change. They don't want to change. No, they do change, but fewer change than should change. So you can't just. People don't get it, and that's fine. But some people do get it, and those are the people that it's fun to talk to and discuss these things. So I'm out of here. Y'all keep riding. Have a good time. Later.